Welcome to France 24 for this new edition of the Talk of Paris. The whole world is fighting against hunger, wants to fight against poverty in Africa, but are we mobilizing enough? To answer this question, we have a special guest today, a global rock star, Paul David Hewson, better known as Bono, a rock star who is an idol for the youth and also an idol for the head of state. Bonjour Bono.
Bonjour, merci.
Alors, bien entendu, aujourd'hui
People are saying that we should be more generous with Africa again. But where's all that aid going? Is it being used properly in Africa and elsewhere? Can you name one country where European aid, for example, is being handed out and used properly and sensibly and distributing aid properly?
Well, if you want to stay in Europe, I'd rather talk about Africa, but, you know, France is a creature of aid. Germany is a creature of aid. The Marshall Plan, they have to rebuild Europe after the war. But Ireland, a country I come from, where I came from last night, is also a creature of EU aid. And, you know, Ireland was a very, very poor place, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And now Ireland has, you know, I think the second highest mean average wage in the world. And so aid can work. You need to invest in education, you need to invest in infrastructure. Africa is our next door neighbour. As Ireland was to Europe, Africa is only 8 miles from Europe. We should remember this.
We'll obviously be getting back to Africa and to the impending G8 summit, but as you're Irish, I wanted to ask you whether you were surprised by the fact that a sizable majority of Ireland's people voted against the Lisbon Treaty. Did you vote yourself?
Yes, I voted yes. It was a difficult manuscript and it wasn't very well explained at home. And I think what happened was three things. One, on the extreme left, spread stories about what might happen. On the extreme right, spread stories about what might happen. They created some quite unusual alliance in the no camp. And I think the third reason is perhaps more interesting, which is people don't get Europe right now, and not just in Ireland, but throughout Europe. Europe is a concept, it's an idea that's yet to become a feeling. And I think unless people feel Europe, feel what is Europe about, it's hard for them to get excited about it, even though they've benefited so much from it, like Ireland. And I think the issue of what to deal with the continent of Africa, our next door neighbour continent, actually focuses people on European values. What are European values? Do we have any values at all? And do they include being able to make promises to the poorest of the poor and then not keep them? Do they include being able to have photo opportunities with all the great and the good and then not fulfill your obligations? It's one thing to break a promise to yourself, to your electorate. It is a wholly other thing to break promise to people whose lives are depending on those promises. So I think that is a failure of Europe and our values if we have them in Europe.
Do you feel that today Europe might be deadlocked? A diminutive country is holding 500,000 people to ransom, and this is almost a political earthquake, isn't it?
You know, it's not my field of expertise to comment on European unity, and in this moment I don't think Ireland wishes to hold back the progress of Europe. I genuinely think the Irish people were not sure of the implications, and that is why they voted no. They are not spiritually opposed. In fact, they're very encouraging of the concept of Europe. But I'll say one thing about Ireland. Ireland is keeping its promises and its commitments to the poorest of the poor. In fact, Ireland is number 6 now in the list of the countries in the top 20 of people in terms of a per capita commitment to the poorest of the poor. I'm very proud of that.
One last question about Ireland. Do you think talks and another referendum to see whether Ireland can join Europe and adopt the treaty are the way to go now? Do you think Europe is ready for Ireland?
I'm not the person to be asking that question to. Yes, maybe.
Yes, what? Another referendum?
I'm the guy that talks about Africa. That's who I am.
But Europe sends aid to Africa. If Europe stops functioning, it will hurt Africa. That's the problem. That's the issue here.
That's a very serious problem, because if European aid follows the French model, which recently has been in decline, it's very bad for Europe and very bad for Africa. I accept that. The French will decide whether these issues are a priority for them or not. And if France falls away, we will, others will use it as an excuse. We have the UK, we have the United States, we have Germany. We hope we have France. I have high hopes for President Sarkozy. I like him very much, but we have to see the actions matching the words.
I'll be asking you exactly what you expect from Europe and President Sarkozy, but this show's tradition involves a flashback across your life and career, starting as U2's frontman. Let's look at this profile by two France 24 journalists, Regan Hanucci and Sylvain Sinker.
His birth name is Paul David Hewson, but the Irish musician and activist is better known as Bono, the U2 singer with the wraparound glasses. He was born in lower middle class Dublin to an Anglican mother and a Roman Catholic father. His mother died when he was 14, a loss that has informed much of his music. And he's spoken often of his complex relationship with his father. It was at secondary school that he met his childhood sweetheart Ali. They've been married for 26 years. And it was at school too he met Larry Mullen, Adam Clayton and The Edge, and U2 was born. The rebellious tone of the group's first songs gave way to more mature texts using political, social and religious themes. He won fame for his music, and he's used that fame to prise open the doors of power. Bono is now a prolific global campaigner who spent years browbeating and cajoling world leaders into providing debt relief for developing nations. One of his earliest humanitarian engagements was in 1984, when he was involved in the Live Aid campaign for famine relief. He would collaborate with Bob Geldof again in 2005 to organise the Live Aid project. The series of concerts took place before the G8 summit to pressure global leaders to drop third world debt and improve aid. Since then, he's spoken at the World Economic Forum at Davos. Bono has been nominated for an Academy Award, for Golden Globes and for Grammys, and even 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. He's received the French Legion of Honour and has been granted an honorary knighthood by the United Kingdom. In 2002, Bono founded the NGO Data. It stands for Debt, AIDS, Trade, Africa, and it's part of his vision to eradicate poverty on the continent.
Do you see yourself today as a rock star, or rather as an ambassador against poverty? Who is the real Bono today? Who are you really today?
Well, the music is what I'm about, and but our music in U2 has always been about what's going on outside the rehearsal room, what's going on in the real world, not just in our rock star life. The inspirations for me were groups like The Clash or people like Bob Marley and Bob Dylan, and we believed that the world is more malleable than people think, that you can kick it and bend it into shape. Things do not have to be the way they are. That's right at the core of our music. Music was like an alarm clock for me. It woke me up as a teenager into what was going on in the world, and educated me. It's been my university, it's been my art school, and that's who I am. And I am also.
Are you still a rebel?
Oh yes.
You've been knighted and awarded the Legion of Honor, but you're still a rebel. A real rebel.
Yes. Yes. Choose your enemies carefully, because they'll define you. U2 always chose interesting enemies, not the obvious. We weren't the rock group throwing the television out the window. We aren't coming to take a piss on the street. Okay, we have interesting enemies. Our enemies are things like our own indifference. That's my enemy. I'm rebelling against my own indifference. I'm rebelling against my own hypocrisy. When you're a kid, you think it's us and them. You know, you're throwing stones at the enemy. It's much more glamorous to be on the barricades for me with a handkerchief and a Molotov cocktail. But actually, I have got more done by engaging in conversations, by making rational arguments, by organizing, doing all the dull and boring stuff. You know, it's not enough to imagine. That's what you guys did in the 60s, sat around and imagined. We're about building the bricks for progress and peace.
What would you like to say to the world's richest countries, the members of the G8 who will be meeting in Japan?
Actually, despite its difficulties, is on an incline. It increased aid by 760 million euros last year. We have heard that this year's budget will be similar. So Germany is doing the right thing, despite the fact that it costs them 4% of their GDP every year, the reunification of Germany.
So congratulations, Angela Merkel.
Angela Merkel has done the right thing. And she's there now with Brown. And Bush made a more modest proposal, but he's keeping it. We need the French leadership. The African continent looks to France. They love the French way. They want the French way. The French must not walk away. And what do I want? I believe that if the French people stand up at a time that's difficult for them, with recession and oil prices, and say, look, we are talking at the moment of French aid which is 0.16% of a $2 trillion economy this year. 0.16%. We made a commitment to go to 5. Okay, it's 0.4 is the ODA that you're at now. It's actually one notch up. It's about $1 billion in extra aid is what we would need in the next year or so. And we think for the price for French leadership, we think the French people are behind that. That's our view.
But what do you say to the G8?
Oh, I would say that there's a lot at stake. The whole political process, you know, are these just talking shops? Are they is this a joke that you can stand in a photograph with your arms around other statesmen and say, yes, we make a promise to the world's poor that we will increase aid to Africa over the next 5 years by 25 billion, and then walk away and it's not there? You know, Jacques Chirac signed in his own name. Tony Blair signed his own name. They became contracts at that moment. It's not just some communique. There's a lot at stake in this stuff. I mean, and it's not just the moral stuff. You know, what I like about President Sarkozy is he's not motivated by guilt. Forget the past. He's about the present and the future. He realizes that we need Africa as a trading partner.
Yes, but France pushed back its pledge from 2012 to 2015. So we're going to be late too. So he will be late too.
If we can live, it's hard, but we can live with him moving the goalposts from 2012 to 2015, as long as he puts the ball in the back of the net in terms of French commitment. We really can, and that's less people going to school, but they'll eventually get to school.
The last question, because I know you have a plane to catch and get back to recording your new album. The US could well have a black president soon for the first time. Do you think his Kenyan extraction might make a difference in the US and in Africa? And while we're at it, will he win?
Well, I like Barack very much. Senator Obama is somebody that we've worked very well with over the last few years. I know him quite well. He has signed up to an increase in aid. So he will support the Global Fund, as France does. He will do, I think, a great job for us. But one of the reasons he will is because there's a growing movement in America of people who say this is important to them. People who want the United States to be seen as a benign presence in the world, not just a military presence in the world. So our campaigners, the One campaigners, and One starts its campaign here in France today. You can sign up with one.org. Wherever Barack Obama goes, there's people asking him questions about Africa. Wherever actually John McCain goes, there's people asking. In fact, when there was 10 candidates, they were all being hounded by One campaigners. This is real politics. I don't know if you've heard of the National Rifle Association.
Yes, of course.
Yes,
it's a very dangerous thing in the United States. And they're the people who make sure it's okay to be able to buy a gun in America. We don't think it's okay, but they're very organized. We want to give for the world's poor. We want to be the NRA for the world's poor. We want to be very organized, and when people support us, we get behind them, and when people come against us, we remove support.
So Obama in the White House would be good news for the world and for Africa?
I think it'll be very good news for the world. Though I hasten to add, John McCain is a supporter of our ideas too.
So who would you vote for?
Oh, because once I put on this T-shirt, one, I gave up my right to be from the left or from the right. This is the one thing both can agree on. So I am now, it's a very unusual sight to have a rock star, especially an Irish rock star, because we never shut up. But I will remain mute about who I would vote for, were I American.
Bono, thank you very much for being on the Talk of Paris.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. And I propose to take a little break. Let's watch on the news on France 24, and we will see you back in a few moments with Bob Geldof. So let's watch the news together and stay with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Merci.